The morning Kieran Vale walked into the glass tower wearing a faded shirt, worn-out shoes, and carrying a cracked second-hand briefcase, nobody knew that the man standing in the crowded elevator was worth more than the entire company he was applying to. Nobody knew that behind his tired eyes was a billionaire who had spent years building one of the largest logistics empires in the country. And nobody knew why he had deliberately made himself look poor. But by the end of that day, one unexpected act from the company's CEO would force Kieran to question everything he thought he understood about money, dignity, and kindness. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can give people a second chance when the world has already judged them, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Your support helps us bring more stories about courage, family, and the moments that change lives. Kieran had not always been a man who worried about the price of milk. Years earlier, he had built Vale Horizon Logistics from a tiny rented office into a powerful international company. His name appeared in business magazines, his photograph hung in conference rooms, and investors listened whenever he spoke. But success had never been enough to protect him from loss. 5 years earlier, his wife, Marisol, had passed away unexpectedly, leaving Kieran alone with their 4-year-old son, Soren. From that day forward, Kieran stopped measuring life in contracts and millions. He measured it in school lunches, bedtime stories, scraped knees, and the small hand that reached for his whenever Soren became frightened. As Soren grew older, Kieran became increasingly uncomfortable with the world his wealth had created around them. People often treated him differently when they discovered who he was. Employees became nervous around him. Strangers suddenly became friendly. Some applicants exaggerated their achievements simply because they knew he was wealthy. Kieran began wondering whether he had ever truly seen how ordinary people were treated when nobody important was watching. Then one afternoon, while reviewing reports from one of his investment companies, he noticed a growing problem at a smaller technology firm called Northstar Systems. Employee turnover was high, entry-level workers complained about unfair treatment, and managers seemed obsessed with appearances rather than potential. Instead of sending investigators, Kieran made a strange decision. He would apply for a low-level administrative job under a shortened version of his middle name, hide his wealth, and experience the workplace exactly as an ordinary applicant would. That decision brought him to Northstar on a bright weekday morning. The city was busy beneath a clear blue sky, sunlight reflecting off windows and sidewalks as people hurried toward offices. Kieran had deliberately chosen an old jacket from the back of his closet, worn brown shoes, and a plain canvas bag. His resume showed years of modest experience, enough to qualify him for an assistant position but nothing that would attract attention. He had even left his expensive watch at home. The only thing he refused to change was the photograph of Soren tucked inside his wallet. The receptionist barely looked up when Kieran approached the desk. She glanced at his clothing, then at his resume, and her expression immediately changed. She told him the position was highly competitive and suggested he try a smaller company. Kieran thanked her politely and waited. After nearly an hour, he was finally called into an interview. The hiring manager asked about his education, his previous work, and why he wanted such a basic position. Kieran simply explained that he was looking for stability and wanted to provide a better future for his son. The manager seemed unimpressed. He asked whether Kieran could handle pressure, long hours, and being overlooked. Kieran quietly answered that he had already survived things far more difficult than being overlooked. Across the building, however, Northstar's CEO, Amara Voss, happened to notice Kieran through the glass wall of the interview room. Amara was known for being demanding, disciplined, and almost impossible to impress. She had taken over Northstar when it was close to collapse and had spent years rebuilding it. Unlike many executives, she regularly walked through the lower floors and spoke to employees. What caught her attention was not Kieran's clothing but the way he treated everyone around him. While other applicants complained about waiting, Kieran thanked the receptionist. When a janitor accidentally bumped his chair, Kieran immediately apologized for being in the way. When an elderly delivery worker struggled with a box, Kieran stood up and helped without hesitation. Amara asked to interview him herself. She did not know his secret. She simply wanted to understand why someone who appeared overqualified for humility had such calm eyes. She asked what success meant to him. Kieran looked toward the window, where sunlight filled the office, and said that success was being able to look at your child at the end of the day and know you had done something honest to make his life safer. Amara was silent for several seconds. She had heard hundreds of polished answers from ambitious professionals, but this one sounded different. She offered him the job. Kieran accepted. For the next several weeks, he worked harder than anyone expected. He arrived early, cleaned his own workspace, stayed late, and never complained. Some employees mocked his old clothes. Others assumed he was struggling financially. A few deliberately pushed unpleasant tasks onto him because they thought he had no power to resist. Kieran accepted it all without bitterness. At night, he returned to a small rented apartment he had chosen for the experiment, cooked simple meals with Soren, helped with homework, and listened to his son talk about school. His billionaire life had been filled with luxury, but those evenings felt more valuable than any penthouse. Then one afternoon, everything changed. A junior employee named Talia Reyes was blamed for a financial reporting error she had not made. Kieran knew the mistake came from a senior manager who had quietly altered a spreadsheet. Talia was terrified. She had recently become a single mother and could not afford to lose her job. Kieran could have revealed his identity and ended the problem instantly, but doing so would destroy the purpose of his experiment. Instead, he carefully traced the records, gathered evidence, and brought the truth to Amara. Amara investigated. She discovered that Kieran was right. The manager was dismissed, Talia's reputation was restored, and the entire department was forced to reconsider how quickly it had judged someone without power. But Amara began noticing something else. Kieran seemed to understand business problems at a level far beyond his job title. He could identify waste in minutes. He understood contracts. He recognized financial patterns that most employees needed days to analyze. She became suspicious. One evening, after most employees had gone home, Amara asked Kieran to stay. She had discovered that the company's new investment partner was planning to acquire Northstar, cut hundreds of jobs, and strip the company of its most valuable assets. She was fighting to save the business, but the numbers were brutal. Kieran finally faced the moment he had been avoiding. He could no longer remain invisible. The next morning, Northstar's board gathered for an emergency meeting. Amara entered the conference room expecting another battle with investors. Instead, Kieran walked in behind her wearing a simple dark suit. The room became silent when the company's legal counsel announced his identity. Kieran Vale, founder and majority owner of Vale Horizon Holdings. The same man everyone had treated as a poor temporary worker had enough wealth to purchase Northstar outright. Amara stared at him, stunned. She felt betrayed. She thought the entire experiment had been a test designed to judge her and her employees. But Kieran did something nobody expected. He did not criticize her. He did not fire anyone. Instead, he explained that he had come to Northstar because he wanted to understand what happened to people when nobody knew they were important. Then he revealed the reason he had decided to stay. Amara had been the only person who had looked beyond his clothing. She had given him an opportunity when others had dismissed him. She had protected Talia when doing so was difficult. She had built a company where people could still become better if someone gave them a chance. Kieran offered to invest whatever was necessary to save Northstar, but he made one condition: employees would receive fair wages, managers would be evaluated on how they treated people, and struggling workers would have access to emergency support. Amara asked why he would trust her after deceiving her. Kieran simply explained that sometimes people hide the truth because they are afraid of being loved only for what they possess. That sentence stayed with Amara. Months later, Northstar was thriving. Talia had been promoted. The employees who once laughed at Kieran now respected him, not because he was wealthy, but because he had never used his wealth to make himself superior. And Amara became a close friend to Kieran and Soren. She often joined them for simple lunches where nobody discussed stock prices or corporate acquisitions. They talked about school projects, family, dreams, and the strange little moments that made ordinary life beautiful. One bright afternoon, Kieran watched Soren running across the company courtyard with a paper airplane in his hand. Amara stood beside him, smiling as the boy shouted that his airplane was going to fly farther than any executive jet. Kieran laughed. For the first time in years, he realized that his greatest discovery had not been about business at all. He had learned that wealth could buy comfort, but it could never purchase genuine kindness. A person could own buildings, companies, cars, and entire neighborhoods, yet still be poor if they had nobody who cared whether they came home safely. Kieran had entered Northstar pretending to be broke. But the CEO gave him something money had never been able to buy, the chance to believe in people again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes people deserve second chances, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Sometimes a simple act of kindness can become the beginning of someone's entire new life. And before you leave, special request, comment, kindness changes everything, if you believe we should never judge a person by their clothes, job, or bank account. Because you never truly know what someone is carrying behind a tired smile. The person standing quietly beside you may be fighting a battle you cannot see, raising a child alone, rebuilding after loss, or simply hoping that one person will treat them with dignity. And sometimes, all it takes to change their life is one person who chooses kindness when everyone else chooses judgment. That was the lesson Kieran carried home that afternoon as Soren reached for his hand. The billionaire who had pretended to be broke finally understood that the richest thing a person can possess is not what sits in a bank account, but what remains in the hearts of people after you have helped them stand again.